Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to our April 10th Township Committee meeting. We also have Dr. LaSousa with us here tonight. You must be very popular. It's just amazing. We haven't had this many people in quite some time. So they're all here to hear you, I'm sure. So Dr. LaSousa is going to give us the school board budget presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the committee for allowing me a few minutes tonight just to speak about the school district's budget and answer any questions that you have. And I'll just give 3 quick thank yous, one to Tom for being so accessible to us here in the township building, and to Chief Henley and the police who support our schools and our students literally every day. And then to John Pacelli, whom I've spoken with more times at 4:30 in the morning this year than I care to admit. But obviously the schools can't open, they can't run without the help of the great workers that the township employs. So I thank all of those folks and others too. So I'm here tonight to present the school district budget for the 2014-2015 school year. I'll begin by just noting that we are becoming an anomaly. A couple of years ago, Governor Christie signed into law a bill that enabled school districts to push their budget or their board elections to November, and in so doing, they would then forfeit, if you will, the budget vote. So over 90% of school districts in New Jersey now have their school board elections held in November, and we are one of the very few left who continues to hold our election in April along with a budget vote. So that's one of the reasons why you might see perhaps a little bit less attention to school district budgets in the general area. We're the only school district in this part of the county that has a budget vote. So also begin by showing Chatham in comparison to other school districts like us. We are a K through 12 district, a pre-K through 12 district actually, so we service students K through 12 as well as some preschoolers. And there are 14 other school districts with that configuration in the county. And what I have up here on this first chart is just simply the per pupil budgetary cost for each of the K through 12 school districts in Morris County. And this has been a pattern that we see historically, and that is that the school district of the Chathams on a per pupil budgetary basis spends less than most other school districts that are similarly configured. Yet at the same time, our outcomes, our student outcome, achievement outcome tends to be up toward the top of the range in relation to other school districts. Outside of the county statewide, there's a similar picture. The Department of Education groups schools according to something that it terms peer school groups. Chatham High School's peer school group is up here. At least these are all the high schools that pertain to a K through 12 school district so that you can compare spending costs. And again, outside of Morris County, which happens to be one of the wealthiest counties in New Jersey, Chatham still has kind of a similar profile in that on a per pupil basis it spends less money but does pretty well by other academic measures compared to those schools in the Chatham High School peer group. Some of us probably have many friends and relatives and others in nearby communities that are similar to Chatham, so I just kind of selected other K-12 districts that are nearby, similar cost of living, regardless of the county, and similar profile in terms of students. And again, Chatham spends less money per pupil than all the schools on this list, but its student outcomes are favorable compared to these 10 schools. And these are all absolutely fabulous school districts, of course. So our Board of Education, of course, then, its goal tends to be to try to maintain that level of performance and the level of educational experience that parents have come to expect in the school district with the resources that it has available, recognizing that almost the entire school district budget is funded through the local tax levy. And as you all know, the tax levy increase from year to year is limited to 2% with some exceptions. This year, the district did not qualify for any of those exemptions to the 2% cap. but in past years, the district has qualified for such exemptions. And so this year, there is about $500,000 remaining in what the DOE terms banked cap, which just means that if the Board of Education were willing to, it could increase the tax levy increase by an amount equal to $517,000 beyond the 2% cap. We got a little bit more state aid this year than we did last year, but we still are standing far below the kind of aid we received in previous years prior to 2009, 2010. So our direct state aid increased by $81,000. This is just a quick portrait of state aid over recent years, and you can see this is not adjusted for inflation or anything like that, just a straight dollar amount, what we received in 2009-10 versus what we receive now, and you can see we've been pretty much flat the last 3 years. Our rate of spending on a per pupil basis has been below that of the statewide average, and it's tracked inflation the last couple of years, but overall, in terms of a prior 7-year look, we stand below the cumulative rate of inflation and below the type of increase that the state of New Jersey has seen on average. I know Mr. Brower asked me about something like this last year, and I included this slide to show this particular thing. So the board then, in evaluating its course of action for the budget, looked at all of that. Just to reiterate, a 2% increase in the tax levy would have been the maximum allowable amount the Board of Education could have considered raising the budget, in addition to the banked cap, and then with a little bit of increase in state aid. If you take out the increase in state aid and just look at the allowable tax levy increase, the max that the Board of Education could have considered was 2.93%. Last year, it was about 4.13% or so, if I recall. So the board discussed with the administration, of course, trying to keep the tax levy as low as possible and not just assume a 2.93% increase. Ultimately, the board approved a budget that would raise the tax levy increase by about 2.5%, and that would enable the district to operate all of its current programming, meaning there would not be a reduction in any program, and also maintain or initiate programs that had previously been approved earlier in the school year from a curricular and instructional standpoint, primarily some enhancements to the Chatham High School programs of study and the middle school program of study. On top of that, we've had some enrollment growth unpredicted in the demographic forecasts that we've had done professionally. We have right now at Milton Avenue School 100 students in 4 sections of first grade, and at Southern Boulevard School we are now up to about 125 students in 5 sections of second grade. So we incorporated 2 additional teaching staff members at those levels to try to keep class sizes where they've been in recent years and not risk having more students move into either of those grades and having in excess of 25 students in any one classroom. And then, of course, New Jersey Ask testing is being replaced beginning next year with something called PARC, and that's the Partnership for the Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers, designed to measure students' acquisition of the Common Core. In addition to that, if we have enough attrition through just natural retirements, we may be adding an elective course in theater arts into the program at Chatham Middle School. That was something that we eliminated in the process of making enhancements to the middle school cycles program. But that's not included in these kinds of numbers here, in these expenditures. So this is an overview of expenditures. This slide, of course, all of this is available on our website, so if you can't see it that well, you can go to our website. There are 2 primary drivers that are pushing the budget up above 2%. One is special education costs, the other is health insurance costs, which we have labeled there or slotted under employee benefits. Special ed is just an area where we're seeing a greater diversity of needs in our students. We have a very small percentage of students, probably we have about 40 right now, between 40 and 45, who we send out of district. We're unable to meet their needs here in Chatham. The tuition rates for those schools that those students attend are approved by the state, and they're going up nearly 10% next year. We don't have control over that. And in addition to that, it's just, as I say, become a more diverse set of needs that we're trying to meet, and ones that we have to meet. We don't really have a choice in so doing. In terms of health insurance costs, I know that just about everyone is wrestling with this, and not only here in Chatham, but in New Jersey, nationally, and so on and so forth. The board has taken steps to try to control these costs. Like the municipality here, we are in the midst of Chapter 78. We're implementing it this year. That we're only in the first year of implementation for our teachers this year because of when their previous agreement expired. But we've also introduced a wider range of plans, and we're trying to incentivize people to carry or select health insurance plans that are less costly to the district. Beyond the base budget, our board has opted to ask a second question. Last year, the board asked 2 second questions, 2 additional questions beyond the base budget question. This year, there will be 1, and it will be to enhance the district technology education and computing program. Many other districts like us have a K-5 program or K-8 program with staff with a standalone curriculum in the area of computer and technology education. We have not had that in place, so this question would put one in place. We think that given the projections, the demands, the needs in the current times we live in, this is an important step to take to better prepare our kids, make them a little bit more competitive by the time they leave us. And then there are some other resources that we would acquire with this money, including additional Chromebooks for the library media centers at the middle school and the high school, as well as some improvements to our lab spaces, which have not been upgraded in quite some time at CMS and CHS. And the cost of the second question is $460,000. So there are 2 scenarios similar to last year, 2 questions that will be on the ballot. One will be the base budget question at about 2.5%, and the second will be an additional question so that if both of those questions passed, the tax levy increase would result in a 3.34%. On top of that, we're going to take some money out of capital reserve to deal with typical maintenance and those kinds of projects. So last year, of course, almost all of our capital spending went into the second expansion at the high school to accommodate the very large group of students that we currently have at Lafayette Avenue School. We have over 700 students in the 2 grades at Lafayette Avenue School right now. This year, we're doing some other work, including replacing the field turf that has come to the end of its lifespan. That turf was installed in 2005, and it's gotten a lot of heavy use. And then we qualified for ROD grants through the state to do some window work and bathroom work at a couple of buildings, and then we're going to make some floor upgrades at the middle school, which is something that we've done in other buildings.
Mike, can I ask a question? So the 2 fields that need replacement, they're about $500,000 each, and that's just to replace the top layer, which is essentially the fibers? And
Yes.
Okay.
So those fields went in via referendum for about $2.5 million in 2005, and the $2.5 million enabled or included the complete installment, the drainage, the whole 9. This would be the replacement of the carpet and the filling for the fields.
Yeah, I understand because I was researching it a while ago, and we did our Shunpike field. It's like they have about a 10-year life, and that's it. That's their warranty, I think.
Yes, and we've had them assessed and so forth. 2 years ago, we had an assessment done. We knew that the time was coming up to do this. Compared to last year, you can see that the base budget number and the base budget plus the additional question is just about the same as we proposed a year ago, just a hair less in both cases. The tax levy increase in the newsletter that will be landing in the homes next week, we showed this via per $100,000 of household value or house value, house assessment, and then a $700,000 flat assessment in the borough and the township. But you can see the tax impact, and for the second year in a row now, the township is bearing a heavier brunt of the tax levy increase than the borough. Looking back a couple of years, in 2012-13, the reverse was true, and the borough, because of the swings in the assessment of or valuations in the two municipalities, bore a heavier load. This is a slide that I wanted to include, especially for the Borough Council and Township Committee. These are the 40 legislative districts in New Jersey, and the Office of Legislative Services down in Trenton just released a report a couple of weeks ago. And so I took the numbers from the report. This is the change in funding and in terms of direct aid to school districts, but by legislative district instead of school district. So if you look at what legislative districts were receiving, or the schools within legislative districts were receiving in 2009-10 versus the proposed budget that the governor released about a month ago, the two legislative districts with the steepest cuts are the two that feed into our school district. So if any of you perhaps have any kind of influence with some of the folks who represent us, and let them know that we've been taking it on the chin a little bit relative to other legislative districts in the state, that might be helpful. Because at the same time, those same folks who represent us are voting for laws that require resources. And I've just listed a few up here, but the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights, Park, which isn't a law, the legislature never voted for this, but it's something that the current administration embraces, of course, as well as many other states. Teach NJ, which again, the Office of Legislative Services estimated before our legislators voted for it would cost $50 million, but the DOE or the legislature has allocated no money for its implementation. And then some other laws that have come on the books, again, just in the past year or two, all of them well-intended, all of them, the folks who vote for them are doing it for good reason. No criticism there, just they require time and they require money. Just in the past 3 weeks, March 17th, 21 bills were introduced that could affect us. 28 were introduced on March 28th. And most of these probably won't go on to become law, but some may well, and I just took a smattering of them, but they all, you can tell, would cost money. At the bottom bullet there, for us to have to notify the DOE whenever we reach out to the township police or the borough police is just, I can't understand why anyone would think that's a good idea, frankly, with how often we have to communicate with them. The first bullet seems like a good idea to have carbon monoxide detectors in every school building. Nobody could argue with that, but that would, of course, cost literally hundreds of thousands of dollars if we had to do that in every space that is occupied by people. So it's just an example of the fact that we continue to be bombarded with statutory and regulatory requirements that are not easy to implement and that come at a time when our state aid is reduced. Over the past 10 years, you can see these are the tax levy increases and how the proposed increases would fit into that picture. And we're in the home stretch, if you will, now, where, as I say, the newsletters will hit the homes next week, and the vote will take place this year on a Wednesday because of Easter Sunday and the holiday right before the 23rd. And that's it, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Again, an excellent presentation. let me ask you a few questions, and we've discussed some of these items before, but just so that the general public has an idea of some of the things we've talked about. You know, in the federal government, the third rail of politics is Social Security. Here in Chatham, it's the schools. So let me shock myself a little bit. When we go out and you talk to people, you know, and say, hey, you know, look, boom, another year, we had no increase in the tax rate. Good for us, that's great, doing a good job. Now if we could just get those schools, you know, is kind of the feedback, if we could get those, you know, schools. So it's a simple question is you know, what would it take, really, or is it even possible, the way your budget is structured and what you face, to have a year where there would be no tax increase? I'll let you go with that. And I say that because, as we've discussed also about, you know, you also talk to people, and a lot of the sentiments are, you know, as soon as my child graduates, I'm out of here. And I think that's, sometimes people say that and don't really mean it, but it seems like a lot of people are taking it more seriously now. And I understand that, you know, I understand why people leave the state of New Jersey in general with the tax rates. But with that sentiment, if the community is only revolving around its schools, and people are coming here to send their children to school and then leave, you know, from a township perspective, I sense that's not really the kind of town we want to be. So I weigh that question based off of that. And if you look around and you see the seniors and what they do in this town, volunteer-wise, you know, I'm afraid of the long-term impact of what kind of town, where are we going to end up as a town? So I ask that in the context of those things.
I think that's a really interesting set of questions. I don't know if I have the answers to all of them. I'll say that after we spoke earlier today, I looked up how much Chatham Township has grown in recent years. I looked at the 2000 data, the 2000 census and 2010 census, and I was really surprised because the percentage, the increase in the number in the residents living in the township grew by 3.6%. And I was surprised because in the same period of time, the school district's student enrollment grew 36%, which is, unless the census numbers are wrong, as they're published on Wikipedia, it speaks to an extraordinary transformation of demographics in the community. And I think it also speaks to why we've been in this almost defensive or catch-up mode, if you will. We've had 10 times the amount of growth as the township has had in terms of human beings that we have to service. And, you know, from where I sit, I think that the educational landscape in that time has also changed to be more complex, more competitive. I think the expectations of parents in turn have become even greater than they were a dozen years ago or so when I began here. And then with the mountain of other compliance-related issues we have to deal with, it becomes very challenging for us. So I guess to your first question, what would it take? One, if we did have our funding restored to the levels that we were enjoying 5 years ago before we've even adjusted for inflation, we'd be able probably to come up with something that's more pleasing to some folks. Aside from that, if our enrollment were to kind of tank, that would be, from a financial standpoint, that would enable us to have some flexibility and potentially reduce staff or programs in places where right now that's very difficult. To give you just, you know, another data point, our demographic forecast that was conducted by a professional demographer about a year and a half ago predicted we'd have 204 or 202 students in kindergarten next year. We've registered 235 already. And kindergarten can fluctuate, people can, but it's very difficult for us to try to meet the level of expectations that we know our parent community wants with the limited resources and the limited options we have for bringing revenue into the district. I don't know how to speak to the folks who leave once their kids graduate. I've certainly talked to some of them myself. And I should also say that our Board of Education, as it sits here on Monday nights, has spoken directly to parents who are asking for more and for a greater tax levy increase, to the fact that they have neighbors and they have folks in the community that they speak to who are not in that situation and might be living on a fixed income. And our board members have been, I know, think about the entire constituency regularly when they're making decisions related to the budget.
Evan?
Yeah, let me just ask one more follow-up before I forget, because right now, from a township perspective, 48% roughly of the students are from the township. Yet the township this year is picking up almost close to 60% of the budget, 59%. That trend doesn't seem like it's going to stop, although it reversed a few years ago with what's the ratables that are increasing in town, which is wonderful. And again, you probably don't have the answer to this, but I think it's worth pointing out. At what point do we take a look at this and say, I don't want to say we're getting a raw deal here, but maybe we need to reevaluate the original decision and base it off of some percentage of population or what, because we're sharing the same schools, we have less population, but yet we're picking up more of the cost. If you want to try to address that.
Yeah,
I don't know if there's an answer to that other than that's kind of the facts. But.
That one's probably above my pay grade. But I know when the district formed in the late 1980s, it chose this method of allocating, the tax levy. I think there are three possible paths you can take to doing when you're in technically a regional school district. I don't know what it would take to reevaluate that or change that. I mean, from the perspective of all the employees in the district, we don't know where, who's a borough kid and who's a township kid and where the lines are, and we just try to do what we can for all of them.
Most of the people don't either. That's okay. So.
It would be much easier for us if there was one municipality and everything was spread equally every single year.
One last question before I move on to Bailey is an issue that has come to us about transparency. The word gets thrown around a lot. At times I don't like it because it connotes that you're not being transparent, which I don't think is true of any of us. But this idea that it's more commonplace in government in general. Certainly you've heard Kurt's comments and the Communication Committee, all the members of the Communication Committee and what they're trying to achieve here. And just in general across the country, that seems to be a popular term. We've had a gentleman who has approached us and has kind of thrown it back on our shoulders as to why the Board of Ed, and again, this is probably a Board of Ed question, not for you, but you can carry it forward, as if we were the stumbling block between the Board of Ed being more transparent, because it's our equipment, et cetera, but it's here. But that's not the case at all. And I just wonder, when you look at the tax dollars, and 2/3 of every tax dollar going to the school board, I would think more citizens would want the meetings to be broadcast. They'd want to see where 2/3 of their tax dollars are going. They'd like to know what's going on and have more interest, as they do here. So I don't know if you can address that or not, or how you feel about that, but go right ahead.
I will carry that message back to the members of the Board of Education. There have been members of the community who have expressed that from time to time at board meetings. It is strictly a Board of Education decision. I don't have any input into whether public meetings should be broadcast or not. In terms of communication, sort of in the larger context, maybe, we try to communicate. This is my 11th budget presentation since late February. 5 of them have been in the evening, 5 have been during the day to try to hit different populations of people. We've had video of those presentations online, and our schools and my office tries to communicate in a proactive manner via newsletters and so forth, and yours look great, by the way. And certainly Tom Salvis, the township has nothing to do with what the Board of Education determines in terms of how to run its meetings. Tom Salvis has been great in being helpful in extending his hand whenever we might need it. So I will carry the message back to the board.
Great. Thank you. Bill?
Kevin, Dr. Sousa, you made a good case. You build well and people are going to come. But Kevin has raised the point that I think that has to be addressed both locally and at the state level. A good community is a balance between the ages. And unfortunately, the excellence of the school impacts real estate prices. People get more for their homes because there's more perceived value. And older people can't afford to live in the town, the younger ones can't afford it. I think we have like one person on our police and our public works, maybe two, who can afford to live in the town. Now that's sort of getting a gentrification of well-to-do people, and if they turn around and move out, the system just repeats itself. I think that there's very good reason to try to, and I think the school boards have to join in on this. I don't know whether they'd have the reason to do it, but as in Texas and what have you, for seniors after they've reached a certain age, the school board tax either flattens out or ends. I'm not quite sure, there are different approaches, but to me it seems to me that to maintain a community that's viable and retains the value of its senior citizens, that is important. And the other side of the coin is, unfortunately, COA works against us, but we can't provide moderate income housing without opening it to everybody, and the net result is that very few of our people at that lower level of income can afford it. I think Kevin's got a darn good point, but when you begin to look at some of the other questions, for example, how many people, what's your take on how many people are sending their children to private schools in this town? If they weren't, they'd be in our public schools. What's the number?
I don't have that number at my fingertips.
I think it's substantial.
I don't know if it's substantial. I mean, we usually look at the end of 8th grade, how many kids are leaving. That number has not been substantial. It's been a couple of dozen kids maybe, and then usually we pick up a similar, well, leaving from 8th grade into 9th is the one I'm talking about. And then we usually pick up some that are coming from private school that want to attend Chatham High School. And then at other grade levels, we've had situations in which kids exit whatever placement they're in and they come back to us.
The second question is, we have, you raised the point of the special ed and having to send our children out of the town. I think you and I may have had some conversation, I've had it with a couple of people, of studying whether or not we can incorporate special education students within our own framework without incurring the costs of going outside. Is that a valid effort to try to pursue?
It's absolutely valid. We've been doing that. We believe in that. In that we believe that it's better for kids to be closer to home and closer with their peers that live in their neighborhoods. We've decreased the number of kids that we have attending out-of-district placements from 2 and 3 years ago. We were upwards of 50, I think, in the 2010-11 school year, and that was kind of where we had been. And we've done that by investing in programs inside the district. But there are some needs that we just are overmatched by, and we'll continue to be going down that path and trying to retain as many kids as we can whenever it's appropriate, but it is a difficult challenge.
Well, your chart shows $12,000, $13,000 per student cost generally without working in the capital costs against that. But what kind of a off-the-cuff figure can you give us the cost to educate a special ed student at average?
Well, we have over 600 special education students in the district. A tiny percentage of those kids are out of district. A typical out-of-district placement would probably be in the $70,000 to $80,000 range. And that includes transportation. And we certainly, like every other district, have some students that cost, in excess of $100,000 because they have needs that are much greater than those of other kids. And those of us, I have to say, who have worked closely with those students or who have family members who may be students like those, I personally feel a sense of commitment that is as strong as any to doing what we can for those kids and those families, because those families are placed under great stresses. And I would like us to get much, much more money from the state to help us address issues that students have. We don't always get as much as we want, but we need to do what's in the best interest of every child that's in our charge.
Well, I think we all share that view with you, where the last thing you want to do is shortchange the families and the children. However, your demographics show a big jump in a couple of the lower classes, but then the anticipation is, you never can plan for this, but perhaps a drop-off. Is not the time now to begin considering, if that drop-off occurs, how we can make the savings within the system rather than need it after the fact?
You're talking about enrollment drop-off?
Cost of educating a student.
Sure. So, this year we were expecting a drop-off at first grade. The demographer had projected 322 kids. We're at about 344 as of today. Kindergarten isn't quite where it is, and I can tell you that all year long at virtually every board meeting, probably since October, we've had parents in this audience who've requested that once those numbers start to come down a little bit, we implement a full-day kindergarten program. So our board has, and those parents have a petition with hundreds of names on it, seeking to have our board implement a full-day kindergarten program. And our board has wrestled with, is this something that should be taken on at the current time, given how much it would cost? Or is it something that we can't move forward with presently? And obviously with this budget, the board has determined not to move forward. But they're in a balancing act between those folks in the community who want more of the school district and those who would like it to pare down a little bit its costs.
Do you, I don't know whether you answered my question, would the school board be willing to look to the concept of this senior citizen lid or cap or whatever it was called? If it doesn't start somewhere, it's never going to come. You're thinking in terms of the best for the community, not necessarily the best for the schools, and that's how we have to look, which I think is the question that the mayor has raised.
I know there are state programs, I believe, of varying kinds that afford some level of cushion or help to seniors or folks on fixed incomes. I don't know that much about those, and I don't know what legal authority our board has to.
It's got to be statewide.
Right. So I know the states, some of those states that you refer to, they rely much, much, much less heavily on property taxes to fund education. So I can look into that, and Tom might know more about that actually than I do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
A couple questions, Mike. Thanks again for the presentation. Regarding question 2, I think there's like 4 tech teachers. Are they new teachers or just teachers assuming additional roles and responsibilities?
Those would be new staff members.
Solely.
So there'd be one technology computer education teacher at each elementary school.
Okay.
Which actually is something that we had in the district up until the 2007-8 school year, I think, and they had been eliminated because of lean budget times.
Okay, and then I just want to get your opinion on the Common Core and its implementation. There's a lot of stuff in the news recently across the country of states abandoning Common Core and railing against it. How is it being implemented in the system here, and what's your viewpoint?
Well, New Jersey, good question. New Jersey, a couple of times in the past month, has reasserted its commitment to the Common Core and PARC. Really, what's I think causing people to bristle more now is PARC or the other assessment system that's being used. When New Jersey adopted Common Core in 2010, there wasn't that much commotion over it because the New Jersey core curriculum, content standards in math and English language arts were already very dense and robust. So we were going from one set of standards to another. The biggest challenge with PARC so far is that Pearson, which happens to be one of the largest, it is the largest publisher and test company in the world, they've been changing parameters and and how you deliver the test and giving us information basically on a weekly basis that we try to follow along with. The state of New Jersey just finished, or it might be still in the midst of it, but we're wrapping up the field test for park. We tested in 4 of our school buildings in the past 2 weeks. I think my biggest complaint at the current time anyway is just that they haven't given us any funding for it. I mean, that $81,000 increase, which we're using for a Southern Boulevard school teacher, half of that was supposed to be the DOE allocated $10 per student to help you administer park. And just to kind of give some perspective to that, you have to administer park to every single kid in grades 3 through 11 in math and in language arts, and 2 times a year in math, 2 times a year in language arts. So if you just took a typical classroom at Lafayette Avenue School with 23 students right now, you're getting $230 for those kids. That's not enough for one single Chromebook or laptop or iPad. And yet every one of those kids has to take park on a device. So my biggest complaint would be that we need more resources and capacity to deliver what we're being required to deliver.
Right. And then the last question, and maybe it would have been answered by Municipal Alliance if they were giving their report today, is, we hear of this epidemic of heroin in our communities. And, no one, Kathy's raised the issue in the past, but no one thinks, heroin in our small town, as it were. But can you speak to just the prevalence of that drug or drugs in general within the school system?
I don't have any, hard numbers right now. We did, in the second question last year, ask for an additional student assistance counselor at the middle school level. We had one student assistance counselor, and her role is more than anything else geared towards substance abuse and other more kind of heavy-duty issues that kids might experience. We had one spanning 2,000 kids, so fortunately the second question passed, and I know that we feel that that's been of great value to kids who are in crisis. I was just talking to another superintendent in a nearby district today who told me that what he has heard is that 6 of his graduates over the past 2 years have died from heroin overdoses. And he didn't know the names, but that was just what was kind of in the community in terms of talking points. We have a program where we test kids who we find maybe who we suspect may be under the influence of any kind of substance. If they test positive, we get them as much help as we can. And it's a very serious issue, like you say.
In terms of prevention and educating the kids and all this, just given the fact that outside the traditional, education that goes on, whatever, are we doing anything special, given the, quote, epidemic that's taking place?
I'd say, we're probably doing what we've always done in terms of raising awareness via the curricular program and the health and the physical education classes. We do have assembly programs at times with folks who have battled with addiction. I don't remember the last time we had them in, but sometimes we have parents and their kids who are 12, 13, 15, whatever it might be, come in to speak to a forum about what they've battled through, and I can get more information. That wasn't a question I prepared for in the budget presentation, so I can reach out to Lori Gironda, who's back there, and some others who deal with it more on a regular basis.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question, but it's really, I'm hoping Tom can explain, and maybe Mike will even be able to say something that better next time, but we in the township have something for tax relief for senior citizens who show financial need. Can you explain the name of that program? Is it only municipal taxes? Is it all taxes, including school taxes?
Seniors who qualify get an actual tax credit, and we get reimbursed by the state of New Jersey
For the municipal tax portion only?
the whole thing, the
So
total
that's
tax
the
bill.
senior citizen, the school
Yeah.
budget too?
Yes,
So,
but the income test is fairly low. It's really for people that are on a fixed income, and it's a fixed low income.
So for example, we only have a handful of people who qualify in Chatham Township?
Now, we have quite a few people that get a senior citizen discount, but the discount's like $250. It's not a lot of money.
So it's a discount. Okay.
It is a
Small.
credit, it's a reduction on their bill. We then get reimbursed by the state of New Jersey.
Thank you.
Bob?
I'm good.
Good. Dr. LaSousa, thank you very much. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
While Mike and Peter are packing up their stuff, I would like to congratulate both of them and let you all know how cooperative they always are with me. They both have an open door policy, and I'm not shy about walking to the back hallway to talk to them about things. They're always forthright, and if they don't have the answer at their fingertips, they get it for me in short notice. I try to do the same for them. We have, I think, a great professional working relationship, and the town and the school district, I think, are very fortunate to have such talented people running this school district.